Evening and welcome back. So, good news, or is it? Well, for the most part, yes. So, traineeships are to triple as unemployment fees mount. Traineeships are very similar, akin to apprenticeships. That's what we know it most as. Basically, instead of going to university, you come out of school earlier, you go to work for a company, you've got unpaid work, but along with that, you've got the education which you would normally pay for, and therefore you're learning on-the-job training. You're learning things which are particular to your field, therefore you're specializing and not having to learn a load of things that you don't need to learn, and in doing so, you're far more equipped for the job that you want to do. And with things like this, and I understand that my audience is probably too old for this, but on the off chance that there's anybody younger listening, age is the most vital commodity. It really is. You could say, I want somebody with experience in the trade. I want somebody who's knowledgeable. I want somebody who's dedicated, inspirational, and motivated to do better. And if you hit those five, the younger candidate will always win. Always. Because if you're younger, of course, you're more malleable. You can learn things quicker. You pick up things before the older people will. You've got that youthful energy. You don't need as much sleep. You haven't got the baggage of relationships and families. You're on your own. You're more likely to be single or unmarried. You can go wherever you need to go. Your job will be the thing that is driving you. Your career is what is most important, and therefore you're far more likely to be hired. And because you're younger, chances are you're more enthusiastic and also more subservient. That is to say, you'll listen more and do more in your job. You're not just trying to do the least that is needed to not be fired, but instead you're actually engaged with your work and wanting to do something that is meaningful. And yes, I know, it's difficult to find somebody who is young, who knows what they want to do with life, and that is why gap years, as they're called, are that important. That if you can find a job just to fill the gaps, and then go out, find yourself, if you will, in the spiritual sense of things. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole find yourself thing is utter bullshit. But what it does do, if you're in the process of finding yourself and you've had to go your own way in order to make it happen, is that you become independent and self-reliable. You understand how difficult it is to make ends meet and to try and survive. And if you go out into the wilderness or a third world country or somewhere you don't understand the language and they don't understand you, and you try to get by, you will find it incredibly difficult. And that is the kind of culture shock that I think is needed. That a lot of people, a lot of young people, think that, it's going to be as easy as when I've been inculcated in the institution of education. And then, of course, real life comes along and they go, well, what the hell is happening here? Or worse, this is prolonged because, of course, they go to university and then they're kept within this institution and think everything outside of their gated community is as good as what is inside. And they don't realise how much effort is put in and required in order to not only create that in the first place, but also maintain it. And that flows right over their head. So instead, getting them with hands-on experience, traineeships or apprenticeships, is a great way to go. We all know as well that universities, for the most part, are a complete waste of money. They will put you in debt for decades of your life. Only 17% of people will actually pay it back. Less than half will actually make a start on it. So it is just a complete waste of time. It isn't worth doing. The wealthy people who haven't even gone to university are subsidizing your education, and it's a complete waste. It isn't worth it. Don't get me started. So instead, apprenticeships to basically say, hey, funnily enough, this is actually a way around minimum wage requirements and also how things should run. But instead of getting immigrant workers in, you're getting young people to do the jobs. Because essentially, what you're saying is, hi employer, I would love to work. I would love to develop my skills. I would love to make money. However, I realize I'm uneducated, I'm unqualified, and I don't know what I'm doing. So, is it okay with you if you take me on as a risk to yourself of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing? But, in return, I'm not going to cost you anything. I'm going to do the work that you tell me to do, As I provide value to you, I will of course gain skills, maybe qualifications, but definitely knowledge and experience. And if I'm worth paying because you think me a worthy investment, then please do. If not, I will take those skills and experience and expertise elsewhere to somebody who is willing to pay me. So in the short term, you've got nothing to lose. I'm not going to cost you. Or you've got minimal to lose if maybe I break your tools. But that's about it. So take me on. We'll see what works. If you don't like it, you can let me go. If you do like it, pay me. I'll do better. And then I'll be able to stay with you as well. Simple as that. That is what we want to happen. And yet, for some godforsaken reason, they wish to confuse this and make it really difficult in order to say, instead of having that, and that being the normal thing of, back in the day, medieval times, if you will, the Middle Ages, to say, oh, I'll go help out the blacksmith, and then from then I'll be able to take over and make my living through that, the smithing. Instead of that, of course, they say, oh no, you can't work for free because you've got minimum wage requirements that change dependent on your age, and then it becomes a living wage. But we can get around that by making a new law, which is to say the apprenticeships, as long as they follow these regulations, some of which won't actually correspond to what you're studying for, but we think that's important anyway. I mean, obviously, you're not going to learn what's important while you're doing your job, which seems a bit backwards. If, when doing your job, you don't learn these things, what makes you think they actually need to learn these things? But nonetheless, that is the situation that we find ourselves in. So, the good news is that it allows young people to get a job with a so-called apprenticeship. It is a job. They get to do the things which a job requires, and the people will hire them because they don't have to pay them. It's as simple as that. Obviously, some people they won't if they think they're far below standard, like an IQ of below 82 as the army found out that they're more harm than good. By all means, of course, then they won't hire them. But for the most part, it's a really minimal risk for possibly a great reward, so you might as well. And in the scheme they have here, of course, that if you do it for the year, and they think you're actually pretty good, we'd like to keep you, how about we take you on as a paid employee? Of course, the young person is going to go, wow, this is amazing, yes please. They don't really know anything about it. If you want to make it more successful for the young person, then teach them about how to negotiate and actually learn and develop their skills, and then why it's important. Now, before we move on the off chance I've got any young people listening, or young people, or maybe it's still applicable to you, the most important thing when it comes to learning is not the teacher, is not the subject, is not the syllabus, is not the textbooks, any of that. It is simply why you want to learn. If you can nail that down, if you can understand why you want to learn what you're studying, if you can understand what it'll get you in the future, if you can understand what you're willing to sacrifice now for the person that you will become going down that path, if you understand that, you won't let anything get in your way. You might have a shit teacher, but you understand that, let's say, archaeology is important to you, history is valid. The teacher is going to be annoying. You're going to ignore them and just read the textbook if you have to. It doesn't matter. If you're inspired, you understand why you want to learn what you're trying to learn, you're not going to let anything get in your way. And that's what matters. Same as with these apprenticeships. Obviously, they have to have a black woman doing car work because quotas. Maybe it's not a black woman. Maybe it's a genderqueer, or maybe they're just covered in oil. But nonetheless, if you understand what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, then the how will be easy. If you, as Nietzsche says, if you understand the why, then the how will be second place. You can overcome any how. That doesn't matter. And I know Les Brown says the same thing. That don't worry about how you're going to do it. How you do it will come to you. What you need to understand is why you want to do it. And that is the most important bit. And so the same thing here. And that really is, quite literally, the most important thing to teach young people. It is to understand, hey, you're weird. Everybody is weird. I'm not saying everybody is unique, in which case nobody is and all that kind of thing. But you have a particular thing which very few people have. You might be inspired by cars, as we see here, or aircraft, or electronics, or computing, or security, or sport, or like football, or martial arts, or fighting, or teaching, archaeology again, whatever it might be, you'll find that. You'll find something that you're always drawn to. When you're bored, you find yourself doing that you think is normal, but other people think is weird. That is what you should focus your time onto, and understand that the small sacrifice now is amazing for who you will become. And if you can develop that routine of that small little hardship now, you will see such a tremendous increase. You won't even believe it. I'm not going as far as to say what Elon Musk says, that get a 10-year plan and then try and do it in 6 months. I'm not going that far. I'm simply saying, understand what you want to do, why you want to do it, and you will be able to do it. You will find a way to do it. And there are countless stories of this. Obviously, Sylvester Stallone selling his girlfriend's jewelry so that they can survive while he's writing his scripts. Marco Pierre White, I think it was, moving to Paris on a one-way ticket because he wanted to learn to cook. Any of these stories where you do something really tenacious, bombastic if you will, just so that you can follow what is meaningful to you, that is what is important. So when it comes to the government trying to get around minimum wage laws, because quite simply that is what it is, they've put in £111 million. Of course, if they didn't have minimum wage laws, they wouldn't have to do any of that. So firms in England will be given £1,000 for each work experience place they offer, which is up to 90 hours of unpaid work experience, as well as classroom-based lessons in maths, English, and curriculum vitae writing. You're not getting out of it that easily. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland will receive £21 million for similar schemes, which is proportional for the population. If anything, it's a bit generous. So, as they say, this will try and deal with the aftermath of the coronavirus crisis, as we've seen businesses being hit hard, and they've had thousands of staff cuts in the last week. So as they say, young people's employment prospects are expected to be disproportionately affected by the economic fallout of coronavirus. Why is this? Minimum wage laws. Because they're not experienced enough to be worthy of the wage, they don't want to take that risk, in which case they're not going to hire them. Drop out the wage requirements, they will hire them, and that's what the apprenticeships are doing. Just make another law to replace a defunct one. You might as well just get rid of the defunct one. So traineeships are intended to get people into their first job after education. They last from 6 weeks to 6 months, and they are open to people aged between 16 and 24. As the Treasury says, expanding traineeships will be part of a wider package to support young people and to ensure they have the skills and training to go on to high quality, secure and fulfilling employment. I think they're a bit outdated there. Secure employment is a pipe dream at this point, as surely the coronavirus lockdown, not the pandemic, but the lockdown has shown. It's not secure. Is it fulfilling? If you're employed, maybe, maybe not. So that's still up for debate. If you're very hardworking and industrious, then by all means, it may very well be fulfilling to be employed. You know what you're doing. It's all set out for you. It's going to be fine. Of course, if you're not, and you're more creative, then you're going to need to find your own way and do something that other people wish to work with you as an individual, which is also perfectly fine. And when it comes to that entrepreneurial spirit, I think that that's something that the United States has really speared into very directly. And as rap songs at least used to like to say, started from the bottom and down at the top. Started with nothing, now got everything. That kind of thing, which is the entrepreneurial spirit. As an employee, it's incredibly unlikely you're going to end up with everything. You might start at the bottom and you'll end up reasonably, but you're never going to end up at the top as an employee. You have to go your own way. You have to make your own mark on the world. And that whole entrepreneurial spirit is sorely missed out on in British education. What you're taught, for the main part, is sit still, do what you're told, you'll be rewarded. And that's it. It's never, hey, you, Jeff, Jeff, I see what you're doing. You seem to be a bit distracted when it comes to everything, except for when we're talking about physics, quantum tunneling, if you will. That when we're trying to talk about English literature and How to Kill a Mockingbird, you're really distracted. When we're talking about the Cold War, you don't really seem to care. When we're talking about differential equations, you're more focused on talking to your friend. But when we get down to quantum tunneling and the de Broglie wavelength, you're really focused in. Everybody else is confused, and you're kind of getting bored by how slow they are. I think that this is what's for you. I think you can actually tune in and focus on this quantum tunneling, and you could be responsible for the breakthrough in quantum computing in order to develop us computers that we didn't even imagine before, we didn't even think was possible before, and yet you will be on the cutting edge. And if you do this, if you follow that passion, you will be remembered for centuries. You will leave a legacy. You will be responsible for the turning point in our civilization, and you will be handsomely rewarded with it as well. If you can solve that so that you can make it consumer friendly, then you may very possibly be the richest person on earth, because everybody wants a piece of that, and they will pay you handsomely for the opportunity and as gratitude for giving them that. So if you follow that, you will be in history books. That is what is missing. That is what we don't see in the education climate. And that's what we need. Britain used to be a great place of engineering feats and successes, and the last one was most likely Concorde, which was out of the 50s basically, which then some would say was out of Alexander Lippish's design in the 1940s out of Germany. But the XB-15, I believe it was, but I could be wrong there, his Delta Wing aircraft, which Convair took as the XB-95. But that's what is missing from the British education system as it stands. And that is really what we need to focus back into. To understand that, yes, you might be weird. You might be different. It isn't self-love. It isn't to say you're fine as you are. No. It's to say, understand your quirks. Understand what makes them good, what makes them bad. If you find it's ADHD except for one particular thing, then sure, focus on that thing. But also understand you need to develop your communication skills in order to get your ideas out there. It's such a simple thing. It's not saying you need to sit down, behave, and be sedated. It's not saying you can do whatever you want to do. It's saying you've got a calling. You seem to like a particular thing. You're good at that. You like it. You enjoy it. Pursue it. Understand it will not be an easy path. But if you understand why you want to do it and you stay true to that, you will overcome any obstacle that comes your way. And that is it. So, yeah, apprenticeships, traineeships, great. They've dropped out minimum wage requirements. But I just wish the Conservatives, any right-wingers really, could understand the emotional necessity behind these things. And I think anyone who can is really going to go far in this world. So until next time, as always, have a good one.